Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Q&A for When I'm Done Dying at the Seattle International Film Festival. I'm delighted to be here with Nisan, zooming in from Istanbul.
Hello, nice to be here on Zoom.
Excellent. I understand that the idea for this feature film actually originated with a documentary that you had made previously. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it was 2015 after I directed my first feature. I did a documentary for MTV, but it was set in Istanbul. And the documentary was talking about the Gezi Park protests and how the youth in Turkey has been like inspired by it. And one of the groups that I did the documentary with was these rappers from the slums of the city. And that's how I got a chance to know the slums better. And after directing the documentary, I actually spent about 2 years in the slums. I started teaching, volunteered, teaching the youth communities there. And the film came out of those times I've spent there witnessing the problems the youth goes through in those kind of communities, their struggles. But I was also really moved by the prominent hip hop subculture among the youth and how they were getting so much inspiration and power from music. And those were the elements that led me to do When I'm Done Dying.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Music is obviously central to the film, both in the story, but also in the soundtrack. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the collaboration behind the music.
Yeah, actually, there is the whole other level of production in terms of music in this film. We have 3 full songs. Even though we are not hearing the entire songs in the film, I wanted them to be completely produced as we are planning on releasing the songs with our Turkish premiere, also, which is soon. So I'm hoping that they will be available on mainstream platforms available to audiences. So 3 songs and 2 freestyle songs and one a cappella, and all of these took time to write the lyrics and get the beats made. And I was lucky to collaborate with one of my favorite Turkish beat makers, the Poet, which was great. I was listening to his songs actually when I was writing the script to get inspired. Wow. And it was a great chance to be able to work with him at the end. Yep. And he really loved the story, and coming from underground hip hop culture himself, he found it very realistic, and that's why I think he agreed to get on board, because I heard he's quite selective in the projects he picks. And we work with other rappers for coaching the actors as well. And we work with 2 other rappers for writing the lyrics. And one of them was a seasoned rapper called Haiki, and the other is a younger rapper called Ohash. His story is actually interesting. He's a refugee from Iran. He's been living in Turkey for 7 years. He was 16 when he wrote the lyrics for this film. And he spent years of his life here. When they first came to Turkey, his father and he lived in the basement of a supermarket. So he's been through very difficult conditions. So he had no trouble understanding the life in the slums and speaking from there. So it was nice to have his perspective within the lyrics as well. Sure. So this was pretty much the whole musical aspect of the production.
And were these musicians that you had met in making the documentary?
Actually, no. These were completely different musicians, but they're all coming from similar backgrounds and cultures. They all know each other. So it was pretty much the same texture and same style.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of the different creative aspects and elements in the film, I was really struck by the use of animation to dramatize Femi's experience of being high. How did those come about?
Well, you know, the drug addiction theme has been portrayed a lot in films, and I was looking for a unique way of telling this experience of the death trip of the drug high. And animation is something that I've loved for a long time. I started actually telling stories with animations. So it came to my mind actually one night at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I was watching some music videos, and I was watching an animated music video, and it occurred to me like, oh, I should do the drug trips with animation, and like hand drawn animations, so they feel raw and gritty. So I felt like that's a good tool of expression for me, not like a genre only as animation. So that's how it came about. It was a bold choice. Many investors were afraid at first when they heard about the animation idea, because it's a risky choice, you know. It can throw the audience off, like you're in a realistic docudrama style film, and all of a sudden animated scenes come in, and it's a bold choice. I understand, but I'm glad we took the risk. I feel like it really worked out at the end.
Yes, I totally
I
agree.
hope.
I'm glad you did too. I think it works really well. Uh, Here's another question I wanted to talk to you about. Femi's older brother, Erdem, is gay, and gay characters are still relatively rare in Turkish film. And I read an interview where you talked about that character's importance. And I wondered at the time if you meant that the character's sexuality is somehow important to Femi's story, or just that it's important for in filmmaking to be able to represent the full diversity of a society.
I think it's both.
Okay.
Especially in today's Turkey, like the political climate is changing day by day, week by week. And the situation has unfortunately gotten worse since I wrote and directed the film. But back then it had already been quite a big problem as well. But now that it's even worse, I started thinking more like, yes, we should give this fight to talk about gay characters and scream like we do exist, you know, in a way. Because, you know, in Turkey right now, it's become so crazy that the government has banned the rainbow from children's books. They are collecting the books with rainbows in it from circulation. That's how allergic they are so close-minded. So that's why I say the situation is getting worse. So before I was thinking more like I shouldn't be making movies to give a message. Like I wanted to tell personal stories. I believe it should be from heart. And I used to believe like, if I'm personally not giving the LGBT fight on the streets, then it shouldn't be in my movies. I was thinking like that, but now that the climate is politically harsher, that has shifted a bit. But also, like in the story, I like how that creates a dynamic between the brothers, because Fehmi is a total mess. But it shows also something about the Turkish culture, that he is more accepted by the father, who's conservative. Like the brother is a nice guy, you know, he's responsible, he works hard, and he's, you know, taking up the load of the house. And Fehmi is just being unresponsible, and still the father is validating Fehmi more.
Sure.
And this creates a nice tension between the brothers, where the brother is taking revenge on Fehmi by not approving his passion for rap. But they both let go and start supporting each other towards the end. So I also am fond of this dynamic between these two characters as well.
I agree. And it also enriches that character. It sort of makes him more complex and interesting, and sort of more than just a secondary character to Femi's story. It kind of gives him his own complexity. But speaking of social issues that are reflected in the film, whether or not that's sort of the intention of the film, Um, the film also engages with issues of the stratification of social classes in Turkey, or at least in Istanbul, both in the plot, of course, but also in the cinematography. And I wondered how you thought about the visual representation of that class divide.
What I was thinking is actually like when I approach the slum visually, it can look very dirty and gritty at the same time. But whenever there's a music theme in the script, whenever the characters are talking about their hopes, or where music is in more power than drugs, then I wanted the world to be colorful in the slum. Okay. And it's just like the way music brings the color to the kids' life in the slums, like literally too, and that I wanted to reflect visually as well. And the neighborhood where Devin lives is a more like privileged area. We see mostly her house, but I wanted it to be more like pristine and a bit colder colors. So the warmth and the colorfulness was usually originating from Fehmi's world and where the hip hop culture is coming from. That was the source of vibrance, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely see that reflected in the color palette and the way that it changes. And now that you're talking about Devin's house, I remember it's very muted, right? And the lighting is often dimmer and yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So let's see. Now, this is your second feature, right? And you co-directed, I think, your first film, Across the Sea, while this one you did on your own. And I wondered what your experience was like, if there were, how the experiences were different.
Well, I mean, it's pretty much the same process. You know, you still get sick to your stomach before filming, and it's the same struggles on set. And so I wouldn't say the experience was different, but in the first film, it was really good to have a friend, you know, that you can like be with someone and not alone, because for most filmmakers, probably like the first film is a more of a like a fearsome thought in your mind, and I was always telling my co-director like, okay, we think of it like shooting, you know, 7-8 short films back to back, like the idea of making a feature. So yeah, it was good to have that comfort, I think, in the first film. And even though it has the difficulties, if you find the right person, and me and my co-director Esra, we had a good click, then it becomes a good experience. But if you don't find a good match, I can easily see it becoming a nightmare too.
Right, sure.
But yeah, experience-wise, I don't think it was the feeling much different.
And I think you also used some non-professional actors in this film. What was that like, and why did you make that choice?
Well, I'm always seeking for this feeling of authenticity in the film, and I feel like using non-actors does like help that a lot. But it's also risky to just work with non-actors, and it's good to have a good combination of professional actors and non-actors. That is also a tricky combination, because if the energy of performances are not matching, like if one of them feels very professional and the other one feels very like natural, like more amateur, like it could stick out.
Right.
But if you have the right combinations, then I think they both feed each other in a good way and brings out that authenticity. So that's what I was aiming for. For instance, Fehmi, who played the lead, he didn't have acting education and didn't have much experience. This was his second time on a set and first film. Wow. So yeah, it was, but he had this great natural talent, and he's like a very quick learner, smart guy. And we had a very professional, educated actress playing Devin. So I think together they had a good energy too, and it did work out. So we did that in my first feature too with Astra, and I find it that again, it's a bold choice, but these bold choices usually pay off if you can figure out the tricky parts.
How to make it work, right? Let's see, you alluded to the fact that the film is opening in Turkey soon. When?
Well, it's not officially announced yet, so I can't say, but
Okay.
it will be announced very soon. So I can say before summer at least, without saying much. Yes.
Fair enough. Are there particular things that you're excited about or apprehensive about in having the film open in Turkey?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the reaction of the audiences, because I'm a very audience-driven storyteller, and I'm very curious what the effects of the film are going to be, especially in the youth in the slums, like the community that likes hip hop. I'm very curious about their responses as well. They are my film critics. Like, I'm really curious about what they're gonna say too, because they are like the number one target audience. The starting point of me wanting to make a film was seeing young kids who are addicted to this drug, and I wanted to make this film to inspire them. So it's really important that the film hopefully resonates. And you know what I say my dream is? Like, if I'm sitting in my balcony one day and if a car passes by, like blasting out the music from my film, like that's gonna be my top point of satisfaction.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yes.
So now I'm interested in this idea of this target audience. Are you doing any special outreach to them with the opening of the film? Any screenings in those neighborhoods, or marketing?
Well, because of the pandemic, right now all our plans have turned upside down, because in Turkey we are now entering the third wave and it's very severe. So right now all the theaters are closed until maybe winter, and all the gatherings are forbidden. So I don't know when, but eventually that's the dream. I'm hoping to get these screenings after the festival run is over. Hopefully at some point the corona is out of our lives, and yes, we could do these kind of things.
So did theaters in Turkey close and then reopen and then close again?
Yes, they closed last year in March, and they reopened very briefly in last fall for a couple months. Not many people went, and then they closed again in November actually, and they've been closed ever since. We are now in lockdowns over the weekends since November.
Okay. So that means it will be at least initially a digital only release. Is that right?
We are not sure. Maybe right now, like the festivals might have in summer open air screenings if the gathering permissions are given back. That all depends on the government decisions in the next months. I'm hoping that at least some open air screenings could take place. Yeah.
I hope so too. Now, when we started talking, you mentioned that you had just gotten home from set because you are shooting. So can you talk a little bit about your new project?
Oh, yes. Well, it's not one of my personal projects. I'm working for a Netflix series, Midnight at the Para Palace. It's a Turkish Netflix series, and I'm directing 2 episodes. It will be out next year in May. So that's what I'm working on right now. But I also just wrote a miniseries that I am hoping to get made also within this year, hopefully. And I'm also writing, like in an early idea stage, my 3rd feature film as well. So new projects are in the works. But once I finish this production, I'm hoping to move on with my miniseries first.
That's amazing. It's interesting in talking to filmmakers. It's like, you know, the pandemic has obviously had some really negative impacts, especially on theatrical releasing, obviously. But there have been some upsides too, and one of those seems to be that it's been a really good time for writing and for development.
Yeah.
Because, right, you have a lot of time. We all have lots
Yeah.
of time to
Yeah,
write.
that's been the upside. That I wrote my series during the pandemic, and the idea for the new feature also came because we did have plenty of time.
Yeah.
But right now, production has picked up,
Okay.
mostly on commercial shoots, and like online Netflix series are shooting at the moment. But art house films are not so much,
Right.
because shooting in the pandemic means more budget and more time, and
Sure.
the shooting has to stop, etc. It makes the process much more difficult, and filmmaking is already a difficult process when you're an art house filmmaker.
Right.
So I can imagine that it's going to be quite a struggle,
Yeah.
but
And
we'll get through it somehow.
yes, with any luck. All right. Well, Nisan, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and good luck with the release of this film. And we're
Thank
looking
you.
forward to the next one.
Thank you very much. Pleasure for me as well.
Good. Take care.
You too.